Rekindling friendships can be a vital part of therapy. I'd argue it's an important part of life as a whole, gives you a new perspective on your own journey in life, and can even be a gateway to a side quest that gives you the chance to get prolific with the past once more. I'm guessing these might have been some of the thoughts circling Aesop Rock's mind when he decided to link back up with producer and longtime collaborator Blockhead on the single Kiss the Cook for Blockhead's 2019 album, Free Sweatpants. This collaboration was something I loved at the time and still think is a pretty decent track. However, following the collaboration album with Tobacco Malibu Ken, the soundtrack to the mobile game Freedom Finger, and the once again self-produced but boldly conceptual Spirit World Field Guide, I assume that collaboration ended up just a stepping stone on Ace's personal journey to self-fulfillment. That was until 2021, and we got Jazz Hands, a song where Aesop effortlessly weaves over this ambient synth loop and sample-coded instrumental, writing first in a stage-setting reflection in the now, weaving it with his own personal headspace, capped off with a mic and beat drop that ended up the lead single to the first fully collaborative and co-build album between Aesop and Blockhead, Garbology, a project that feels like a full-circle moment in both of their now over 20-year-long tenure in hip-hop. It's also an album that I think excels in that prospect so well, I'd consider it Ace's 5th best project in his catalog. How'd it reach top 5? I'd gladly lay out why. There's a magic within this project that feels immediate the minute the proverbial needle hits the groove. The ambience underneath the overture, The Only Picture, which creates this ideology within the listener of using your past to fuel your creativity, does so wonderfully. Something that could be said to describe the energy of Garbology as a whole, too. I know this is helmed as a first full-time collab, but I'd at least like to argue that Aesop's first full-length, Float, should be co-build if this is co-build. Not just because Blockhead has 3 instrumental interludes on it, but because this new album feels more built upon that album's foundations than even its follow-up. Moments like the bass groove beneath Ledgermain while Aesop weaves this detailed night out skating with friends in the cold winter under the guise of mystery in the woods, or the sparse but interesting percussion samples beneath All the Smartest People enhance Aesop's reconstructing conversations with his neighbor and waxing poetic on death, along with the plucked bass and beat construction on Oh Fudge, a song about turning into a blob during quarantine, and again the aforementioned lead single Jazz Hands are moments that feel like the two really reharnessing their roots in a good way. It doesn't lose what deviations they creatively pivoted towards post Aesop doing his own production, but the track listing has songs that definitely showcase those expansions fuller within the track listing than these moments where they feel like they're more reflecting. Difficult sees him walking further down his own therapeutic circle he was spiraling down throughout The Impossible Kid, feeling like a direct sequel to Shrunk, where he further explores his more reserved or self-proclaimed guarded tendencies, complete with a Kirby name drop. All Day Breakfast brings current frequent collaborator Homeboy Sandman into his creative process with Blockhead, with this reverse sample weaving around the groove that sees both rappers sliding on that groove fantastically. The piano production on Motorcycle adds a foreboding twist to Ace's verses about riding his motorcycle that feels like both artists stylistically in sync. It feels like a spiritual successor to Cycles of Gehenna without the overt Dante's Inferno references. The way the hypnotic sample and synths melt with the bass line is top tier. When the pianos creep in on the second verse and add that depressive tone, where Ace sounds like a man at the end of a series of bad luck. This Is Not a Wizard lyrically reads like a sequel to a track like Basic Cable, but sonically the ambient production gives it this haunting feel that feels more adjacent to some of the production on Blockhead's Sweatpants. All of this is to say that this album is great, but in a way that's different than Spirit World Field Guide, which I'd argue is now his 6th best album. Spirit World is still a great stepping forward on the main quest, while Garbology feels more like a side quest sequel, given Aesop's production also gets to be expounded upon in Field Guide. His production sees him experimenting with ideas he toyed with, as far as atmosphere on The Impossible Kid, with some fun synth play, also woven into the mix on tracks like the lead single The Gates and its follow-up Button Masher, which set a mood otherworldly, where Ace spends the runtime bridging themes from The Impossible Kid with this project's Spirit World concept and sculpting this paranoid spaceship crash in the stars, respectively. Its airy atmosphere amidst the rumbly beat on the skeptically paranoid gauze is set up fantastically through Dog at the Door, which creates this haunting warm-up of sorts to cement the listener into the mindset of Gauze. And ironically enough, taps into a similar energy of the album I'm about to talk about, but I think creates an interesting parallel to his last album's themes with that atmosphere. I mean, 1 to 10 sees the POV of Aesop going through back pain as an older rapper and is entertaining as hell. Proves he's just one of the best wordsmiths as a whole. This stage setting and nuanced imagery on cuts like and Holy Waterfall create this POV amidst the spirit world that add to the headspace of those wandering amongst the ghosts within Aesop's mind. Considering Crystal Sword takes the conflict within the world set inward helps too. He even creates a similar portrait for the listeners in the groovy Attaboy, which is made all the more impressive on the simplistically complex side quest, the ace staple of panoramic painting made prog. As a whole, I think it's a direction I've loved seeing him pivot toward, and I'm glad to have seen him aim for that again on his latest. It's an album that has some wonky pivots amidst also that are very Aesop rock, like in Garbology, like on the track Flies, a track just about fruit flies.
Flies, buzz around a sink, lunch on crumbs, fuck y'all think.
Does so tangentially as well, but I'd argue those deviations on Garbology suit the themes and tone of the record a bit better. Not to say it's a bloated experience, it's nice to see Aesop creatively blend this idea of guidance through his own mind to take a project that sits as one of his longest since his 2000 work, and it's awesome to see him really consistently still deliver. It's the thoughts of his past and current with an ethereal twist. With all that in the ether, I think it's that sort of lack of focus on a broader concept that I still think sets Skeleton not just above Spirit World Field Guide, but above Garbology. I think as far as being a huge swing as a soul producer on here, I think it comes to play with some of my personal favorite hip-hop instrumentals of the 2010s, if not in some instances, of all time. Hell, Firestarter was one of the beats I used on my first mixtape from a few years ago. 5 munchy runs later, still craving donuts. It also feels like a reintroduction to Aesop as a rapper, through some choice peers into a more grim and morbid scope. Yeah, tracks like Firestarter's Donut Recommendation, Racing Stripes' autobiographical dive into a time when Camuteo ran a barbershop out of his bathroom to make rent, and the word flexing on the mechanically propulsive single Zero Dark 30 more bask in a world of positivity, or at least self-boastfulness, comparatively to a large chunk of the project. They help round out the mood. The spirit of the album is still felt more in tracks like The Crow two-piece that bridge the halves of the album together, collaborations with artist Ace had been making music with in the interim between None Shall Pass and Now, with Kimya Dawson on part 1 and Rob Sonic on part 2 acting as this grim intermission to go deeper into the tragedy and death. Ruby 81 dramatically tells the story of a girl saved from being killed by fireworks smoke, and Homemade Mummy goes over how to mummify your cat. It's still an Aesop album, even if it's got its grim tone. He still gets niche with it. I like that mood expanded on in tracks like ZZZ Top and 1000 O'Clock, which have this frustrated tone that feels like Ace working through something internally. There's a feeling of alienation that becomes even more bleak on the outro Go for Guts. Even on tracks like Cycles to Gehenna, where he creates this Inferno-esque tone to his new motorcycle hobby. Grace makes his childhood hatred of vegetables the most dramatic thing in the best way possible. And Saturn Missiles turns a Roman candle fight with your brother into a high-octane battle. Those dramatics feel like seeds that would get better realizing down the line in retrospect, and I think it's neat. It's an album that I love more and more as time goes on. While I love seeing Aesop and Blockhead back together on Garbology, I just don't think it smacks as hard. Plus, I mean, this has been a steady part of my rotation for over 10 years at this point, so maybe the thematics will drive this in over time, but I just can't get enough of the sonic identity of this album. And that world of YouTube is where I would set the Garbology collaboration with Blockhead and Aesop Rock's respective discography. I know I never did Malibu Ken, and I'm still not going to do Malibu Ken, because Malibu Ken to me is more like the collaborations he did with Kimya Dawson and Rob Sonic in the early 2010s, like a offshoot tangent. It doesn't feel like a just slice of Aesop's discography. And I think it's, again, partially for the things that I had talked about in my original review of it, and now. But Either way, I also did this because he just dropped a new album, which I will be talking about in the listening log next week on Thursday. So hopefully you're excited to hear my thoughts on his new stuff and get a little caught up on my thoughts on his discography in this. Thank you so very much for watching. If you liked it, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week, depending on what I've got going on. The end of this year has intentionally been a little more sparse, but I do have some fun surprises and themes that I'm going to be doing throughout the month that I think you guys are going to enjoy. On screen now have been playlists for something to watch if you want to keep watching what I'm doing. I'm going to go, though. Thank you again so very much for watching. I have been Viral Rack. You guys have a good day, lots of situations, and I will see you another day.